Take two.
Welcome to the While You Grow podcast with Dr. Courtney Addison and me, Addison Powell, where we will dive into all things pediatrics, occupational therapy, and other important topics around children and development. So, if you are a parent, occupational therapist, student, or just want to learn more about occupational therapy and pediatrics in general, then keep listening. For more information on the podcast and to follow us on social media, take a look in the show notes. Let's get started. All right, welcome to the While You Grow podcast. I'm Addison.
I'm Dr. Addison.
And today we have Madie.
Yay! Go Madie! Go Madie!
Highly anticipated. Been waiting for her. So Madie is another one of my classmates. We've been having a lot of those recently.
Yeah.
And she's here to talk about her capstone.
Mm-hmm. But before you talk about your capstone, talk about how you recently became TikTok famous.
Okay, so let me
For
go
all
back.
our fans out there.
Yeah, let me go back to the basics.
Damn.
So where it started, the foundation, high school, senior superlative class clown. Okay, we're a dynasty really. Me, my dad, and my brother, all class clown. So as you know, it's going to be funny, whatever the TikTok is. So progressing forward, we go to a Dancing with the Stars live show.
Okay.
And at the very end, we lined up because they let the stars, like whoever wanted to come out, come and like greet us and stuff. So the security guard guy, he was like, just put on your video with the flash and keep it rolling because they're not going to have time to stop and get a picture with everybody because it was like tons of us.
Yeah.
So I'm like, okay. So I did it for the first couple. I met Alan and I met Ezra. I just had a video going and I'm like this, like smiling, and they're like walking by smiling. So then I do it for Riley Arnold. And the person I was there with has type 1 diabetes, and Riley Arnold has type 1 diabetes. So I'm like recording, waiting for her to walk by, and she stops at my friend, and they're having this whole minute-long conversation, and I'm just still recording it, staring at them for over a minute straight. Yeah. At one point, I look at the camera, I like laugh a little, and then I just keep it on them, and I'm just like laughing, okay? Staring at them for a minute. She finally... Their conversation ends and she's like about to jump to the next group. So she like kind of skipped over me, not intentionally obviously, but like skipped over me. And I guess I still had my camera rolling, and at the very end you hear me go, "Oh my God, she hates me." So then I turn it off, and so I was like, oh, this is funny, I'll post it to see what happens. 1.6 million views later, and Ezra and Riley Arnold commenting on it.
They did?
Both of them, yeah. Riley commented, "No hate here." And Ezra said that he was laughing at the very end when I said, like, "Oh my God, she hates me." Yeah. So, pretty much I'm famous, yeah.
Oh, well, I'm so happy to have a superstar with us today.
I think it puts my personality in a nutshell pretty well.
Oh, it does. It does. So you are also, a cohort 3 student, getting ready to graduate. And fun fact, Madie and I have actually written a children's book together.
We
have
true.
authored a children's book.
Yeah.
Still in production.
Right.
One day it'll get out again.
Yeah.
Kind of got released at a hard time. Around here we had the Hurricane Helene. And when we released, it just wasn't good timing. So
yeah.
When the planets align again, we'll get that book out for all of you guys out there. But the book relates to the capstone. So tell us, what's the title of your capstone?
Okay, the title of my capstone is The Relationship Between Attunement, Interoception, and Social Interaction on the Development of Self-Regulation in Kids.
Excellent.
Explain that.
Okay, so attunement is the initial connection between the caregiver and their child. So as soon as they're born, you're smiling at your baby, they smile back. Those mirror neurons are firing. They feel that connection with you. And then interoception are those internal feelings and sensations. A lot of the time we think about like emotions, like, okay, my heart's racing, that means anxiety. I feel anxious. Or my stomach hurts. I don't know if I'm just really full or if I'm hungry, so I have to fulfill that by eating. And then social interaction is obviously, feeling connected and safe with somebody and being able to converse or respond appropriately to maybe how they present to you. And so I look at how all of those are super, super important for kids to be able to develop that prefrontal cortex and all those higher level skills like executive functioning and then self-regulation, of course. So being able to manage and understand their own emotions and how to respond to them.
So you developed a model, and it's kind of like a trifecta of these three things, correct? And that if one's overloaded or one's underloaded, it causes an imbalance. Can you explain that a little bit and what that presents as in children? Yeah,
so when we're looking at all three of those and how they work together, there's different concepts within each, and a lot of them overlap. And so what's cool about the model is it shows them all as their own separate entity that is like developing over time, right?
Right.
So with self-regulation, you don't just come out the womb being able to self-regulate, right? You have external regulation where the caregiver is the one providing all the needs for you or fulfilling those needs that you express. They cry, they're either tired or hungry. What do? Give them a bottle or put them down.
Yeah.
And then it kind of progresses to then co-regulation where they regulate with the support of somebody else. And it goes both ways. The child acts as a co-regulator for the parent as well. They feed off each other's energy. And then it progresses to the self-regulation. But when you skip those phases, then you're missing out on validation of those emotions, or even the capacity to shift or be flexible with your thinking. And so the model kind of shows how those are all separate. And then as time goes on and you are stronger in those connections and they further develop, they get closer to closer and merge together. And then you have the capacity to self-regulate.
Wow. So you work as your capstone with a lot of kids. Shout out to Advanced Therapy Solutions, who is housing Madie for this project. Tell a little bit about like what actually you're doing with this project, with this model.
Okay, so what I've developed is a 9-week curriculum for parents, and it's looking at how they perceive their child's behaviors. And so with each week there is a 30-minute lecture, and it's all topics, concepts, theories, approaches related to attunement, interception, or social interaction. So we talk about, the brain, the nervous system, the sensory system, attachment theory, window of tolerance, zone of proximal development. Let's see what else. Polyvagal theory is a big one. And so each week we talk about that for 30 minutes, and then we do a focus group, and I pose like a question. And actually the biggest question that I've seen is the hardest for parents is, how do they know when they're regulated? And so then we have like a discussion. They have the opportunity to ask questions. They share with each other. They share experiences and ask for feedback. And so with that, I'm hoping that they'll be more aware and are better able to understand those behaviors presented by their kiddos.
Right.
Okay. So how did you having these group for these parents, how did you select what parents would benefit, or was it just come all?
Yeah, so I just created a flyer with a QR code and hung it around the clinic. We sent out multiple emails, and they have 3 different locations, so Greenville and then 2 in Spartanburg, and just sent them through an email list. I did kiddos 8 years and younger, just because 8 years is usually when you're transitioning to first grade, and so you're more so kind of learning to self-regulate a little more. You don't have a co-regulator there as often, so and then from that, people just signed up, and I had 9 participants. One of them dropped before it even started, so now I have 8 consistent participants that just volunteered. But what is cool is one of them thought it was mandatory, and so she showed up, and we were like, why are you guys here? What made you want to do it? She's like, I thought it was mandatory, but she has been here every day since. So even though I told her it was completely voluntary, she stayed. So yes, I take that as a win.
Yeah, that is a win. So one of the amazing things, I got to listen into one of these sessions when I was doing your review, is you talked about, I just think this is such an interesting concept, that what is the feeling you get? And everybody has a different feeling for themselves that is regulated. Like I think Dylan shared that it is a very cooling feeling. Talk about what that means for you, or what a parent can kind of realize, or kind of discuss that a little bit.
So it's crazy. I never even really thought about it until this class, and Dylan was the first one to kind of ask the question, and I was like, do I know when I'm regulated? Because I'm typically very dysregulated, as we all know.
Very
I'm always go. So I was like sitting thinking about it. And then last night we had another group, and it was the last focus group question. So I asked again kind of what made them feel regulated, and I shared mine finally, because I finally figured it out. And I was like, I feel like I can take a breath without forcing it, a full deep breath without even trying. Because a lot of times I guess I realize I'm like, okay, slow down, do like square breathing or 4-second breathing. And so I've realized that usually when I go for like a walk or I'm sitting outside, I can breathe without even like having to force it into my lungs. I don't know if that makes sense, but I know some parents have shared it feels like a weight is lifted off them, but also like weighted on their heart. Like it's off their shoulders and on their heart. Like they feel grounded, but also like the weight has been lifted.
Maybe peaceful.
Yeah, peaceful. Yeah. And the thing we encourage is like, what are those like physiological feelings, you know? Because you can be like, well, I feel calm. Okay, well, what is that for you though? Because everybody's calm is different. Right. And calm isn't necessarily regulated. So
Right.
And I know, like, Dylan, he, like, will hear wind. When he is super regulated or even, like, actively co-regulating with a child, like, he can just hear wind, something like that. So there's very different ways, but I encourage everybody to think about it because it'll make you question it.
Right. And I think the cool focus of yours is that focus on the parent, you know, and a parent, especially with some of the kiddos I know that you guys work with, have specialty in is trauma. So some of these kids come from foster homes or come from traumatic situations or just have experienced trauma in their lives. Whether that be a difficult medical complex kid that had a hard time at the beginning,
right,
or all the way to like an actual traumatic, or not actual, but a physically traumatic event. So, you know, the big part that I want you to kind of explain is why is it so important for this parent to take this class? You know, when you originally think about, you know, therapy, you think about the kid, but why is this parent important?
Yeah, so especially so one of the main questions we asked, I made like a pretest. One of the main questions we asked is, how were you raised as a child? Like, what was your household like? Because I think how parents were raised is a huge influence on how they parent, because they either don't want to be what their parents were or they're trying really hard to be what they want to be as a parent, you know? But like, I've had a lot of parents that are like, I never played growing up. Like, I have no idea how to play, let alone with a kid who's stuck in a cycle of the same play, you know? Like, how do you expand upon that? How do you come up with these ideas? How do you engage and connect with them when sometimes it feels like they don't want to connect with me, you know? And so I think the biggest part of the class is trying to empower them and give them the confidence and give them, you know, the strategies and skills to connect with them. And I think that's the biggest part of it, because they act as the attachment figure for those kiddos and they want them to feel safe. And I think the biggest part for parents that's hard is these kids don't feel safe in their body, not because of their parent, but it's just, you know, their nervous system. They just don't feel safe in their body, which is hard for parents to grasp when they do everything they can to try to make them feel safe. So I think them better understanding how their nervous system works can kind of tell them, okay, it's not me. I need to remember it's not me. It is just their body and what they've been through. It could be some implicit memory of something they have no idea even remember that happened, and they get one smell of something, they see something, they hear something, and it just brings it all back, and then they don't feel safe anymore.
Yeah, we even talked about like that trauma from an early age. We talked a little bit about Erica, and her episode comes out today.
Yay!
Just how even in utero they can experience trauma that impacts them the rest of their life, and sometimes I'm sure that's hard for parents to maybe understand. Like, okay, this is something that it's not me. It's just like you said.
And I think it's hard sometimes because some of the topics are so like dependent on the parent. Like you start talking about attachment theory and all these different attachments, and you know, parents kind of sit there and start to question themselves, like, oh my gosh, I should not have done that as a parent. But you know, it's one of those things where rupture and repair is real. It's how you repair it, right? So rupture is going to happen; it's inevitable. But it's how you repair it, or if you even try to repair it.
There's no perfect way to parent. I'm sure
anyone
can say that.
There is no perfect way to parent.
But the best way to, you know, approach parenting is to better understand yourself.
Yes.
You know, and I think that's the biggest part. We always talk about the book Parenting from the Inside Out. And it's a great book because it helps you understand yourself. And then you can better understand how your kiddo works.
Yeah.
Right. And I mean, I think it's interesting too. You talk about the cycle, and I kind of want to give this information to, you know, some of the OT students that are listening and maybe some of the parents. We have two different sets of systems. We have a parasympathetic and a sympathetic system. So those systems, when they're not working cohesively or overloaded, we get into that fight or flight response, which is when our cortisol levels spike. I mean, it happens as adults. It happens, and it's our natural ability. But you're talking about that fight or flight as a kid, but a constant.
It's consistent.
What does that look like in a kid that isn't a constant fight or flight?
Well, so just to kind of talk about it again, so you have your sympathetic nervous system, which is your fight or flight, and then your parasympathetic, which is your rest and digest. And those are supposed to work in a balance. They're supposed to balance. And so what happens is kiddos who have only been in fight or flight for so long become habituated to that feeling. So it's really hard to break out of that. And those are our kiddos who maybe are consistently holding their breath. You have to remind them to breathe. They are constantly moving around, and they appear like they're tactilely defensive, but they also are like seeking connection so badly, but they don't know really how to connect. Like we have one kiddo who will only work with Dylan. Will only work with Dylan, who's my site mentor, because he feels safe and connected with him. But as soon as somebody new's introduced, it's like he kind of loses it a little bit. So I think being able to understand how your child responds in different situations, because there's a lot of physical signs. There's signs that you can see when they are not their most present.
Right. And we talk about it's not a linear process as well, right?
No.
So you can see regression, you can see when different things come up. But one of the things, we talk about Mason a lot on this show. He has a really irrational fear of monkeys.
Right.
And we are not sure why he has a fear of monkeys, why he has that kind of response. But it actually can be intensified the more he's exposed to it without remediation, correct?
Right.
So, it's, I think Dylan talked about walking down the street. Can you explain that analogy?
Yeah, so we gave the analogy to our parents that, you've walked down the same street to go to work, go to school, whatever it may be, millions of times. It's the same route you take every time. Well, just one time out of these million times, you get mugged, okay?
Right.
You will have a whole new perception of going down that alley. You probably will not go down it again.
Right.
And then even if you're walking a new route and you get, the smell of sewer, you get the smell of trash that just reminded you of that alley, you're automatically going in fight or flight because that implicit memory that's so deep down, it's resurfaced because of that one experience. And the other thing with the monkeys as well, just while I was thinking about it, that we also tell our parents is, so a lot of them have traumatic experiences in the school system, at school.
Right.
Just because they're not understood, and what in their needs a lot of the times. And so they're confused. They're like, well, I picked up my kid from school and I gave him his favorite snack. I gave him water. I was in a good mood. And he gets in and just is screaming at me. And it's kind of like, okay, well, it's not you, but you're the one who dropped him off at the last place he wants to be. And you're the one that picked him up from the last place he wants to be. So it's not you, but you're the factor that is a part of it in what is so traumatizing to him. Yeah. So he may associate the monkeys with you if he's on your phone and it pops up,
Right. That's interesting. And just knowing there's nothing you can really do about that. It's just factors outside of your control. And even though you just got to think it's not always rational of why things are happening, but they do. So it is important to be there and co-regulate, correct?
Right. Of course.
Yes.
And it's always better when you understand that is affecting them, and so you're better equipped probably to handle it. So you've been doing this for 9 weeks, right?
Next week will be my 9th week, but I've already started collecting data from the post-test, just because next week is more so just wrapping it up, more strategies, interventions, not really a focus group discussion. So
what are you finding so far in your data?
Well, so one of the assessments I did was the Parenting Stress Index. And it just talks about there's a child domain and a parent domain, and then total life stress. And life stress, that category is the your non-controllables, like a death in the family, or you lose a job, things like that. So the child domain is a lot of behaviors, and then the parent domain is stuff like your relationship with your spouse, your work, whatever it may be. And so originally I just have been doing average T-scores of each group. And so the pre-test, the child domain was really, really high. And it could the post-test could either go two different ways. It could be that the child behaviors the score increases because they're more aware of the behaviors, or they score them lower, and so it all decreases because they're like, oh, well, that's not what that behavior is. It's something else, which is what I've been seeing so far, which is completely opposite of what I thought it was going to increase, but it's actually been decreasing, and it's because they're not saying it's a bad behavior, really, or something that's causing them stress, because they know how to handle it now.
Oh, okay. Fascinating.
Right? It's really interesting.
So the behaviors themselves may not be decreasing, however,
but they know what to do with the behaviors. So it's not as bad, in quotes, or stressful for them. Yeah.
Right.
That's awesome.
And we've talked to since Dr. Keen's, and kind of two themes have emerged from our podcast so far, as meeting parents and people where they're at, but also that behavior is communication. And when you understand that behavior is just more of communication than it is anything else, that immediately takes a load off of all right, this isn't about me.
Right.
This isn't, yes, maybe I'll be, I'm influencing it or this and that. but it's more about what they're trying to communicate. How do I understand that communication?
You can like almost learn an instinct, like, okay, he just screamed. He's not just doing it to do it.
Right.
Let's figure out why
something.
he's doing it.
Right. I mean, kids don't wake up in a malicious way and are like, well, you know what, that therapist, I'm going to give him heck today. Nobody's, maybe some.
There might be a couple.
I know 2 2-year-olds in our house that choose violence every morning.
But
That might be the WWE they've been watching.
yeah, that could be the WWE.
Yes. Oh man. So what has been like, if you can think of like a really enlightening story that you've had in this experience, or just an aha moment where it was like, I'm making an impact and this is incredible.
Gosh, so I have this group at 9:00, and they both of their kiddos see Dylan, so they kind of know of each other, so it kind of makes it a little more like personable, I guess. And we know their kids, and I've seen them, and they have very similar personal situations, and we go over the time every week. It's like 2 hours. Actually, I think it was the one you sat in on.
It was.
So this group, specifically, it's 2 of them, they have reached out to each other and provided each other resources, ask each other how they're doing, tell each other they're praying for each other. They have decided to start a book club together. Yeah.
That's awesome.
And it's so like just beyond like the group, they've like
Making
stayed
connection.
connected, you know, and they have something really exciting that like happened like this past week. One of the parents connected so well with their son outside. They just sat in silence, and everybody was in tears. Like it was just, and she was so excited to share with us.
Aww.
And so I just think it's really cool that they've kind of been able to even be together outside of the group of the class.
That's amazing.
So you're doing some amazing things right now, and I'm sure the parents are going to be sad when it's over.
Yeah.
Are you doing anything, or is Dylan wanting to?
So we've already kind of talked about like if this progressed, what changes we would make. I probably wouldn't make it 9 weeks. I'd probably shorten it a little bit just because that's demanding, and like parents have lives and like therapists have lives. And so 9 weeks is a lot. And I think a lot of things that we talked about can be grouped together. So I think there's definitely a future for it, because I think so far I've had really positive feedback on it, and I think if the word is out a little more, I think a lot of people would really benefit from it.
And what if a student here wanted to maybe continue your project? What would you like to see out of it if you don't do it personally yourself?
I would love for it to even expand upon parents. I would love to see it in the school system. I would love to see it with like early interventionists. I would love to see it with other therapists, because I mean, there's tons of therapists where I'm like, oh yeah, attunement, and they're like, what? I'm like, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Yes.
So, you know, I think there's a place for it. I think we get so caught up in the facts and the science, but sometimes it's just about connection, but what's the science of the connection, you know?
Right.
And I think that part we kind of forget about. We're like, we have to do this intervention for this skill, but that's not always what it is. If they're not regulated, they don't feel safe or connected to you, you're not going to get anything out of it.
Yeah.
Yes.
You can have a plan, and that will most always go off the handle, and then you sometimes sitting in silence is your intervention.
And even if you do the same thing over and over the whole session, it's important, you know.
Well, yeah, they're not going to retain it if they're not regulated, or they don't feel safe with you. If they're not in that, you know, if you go back to polyvagal theory, if you're not in that social engagement and you're just in fight or flight or shut down, you're not going to retain anything that you're being taught.
Yeah. Absolutely.
And if for that 60 minutes you're with that kid, if they get out of that fight or flight, that is therapy.
And sometimes it'll take 30 minutes of pushing a kid in a swing for them to be ready, and then they'll kind of, you know, tell you they're ready to get out, and then they're ready to do whatever you want them to do.
You know, and we've brought this up before, that kids are resilient, and yes, they are resilient, but they need connection. They need, I think that sometimes it's like, oh, they'll be resilient, they'll do this, and it's like, yes, they have the capacity because they're more neuroplastic, they have the ability to build better connections, but it is that part of the therapist, that part of the parent to create that environment.
Right.
You know?
They can't, it's not something they can just do by themselves. You know, you have to have that co-regulator there, and they have to be in the place where they feel safe to be able to do that. If a kid is super dysregulated, you're not going to give them the hardest challenge and expect them to just get through it.
Right.
That to them is traumatizing.
Right.
Yeah.
You know, when they're in a good space, you know, they're playing outside and something happens and you're just like, okay, well, let's maybe wait 5 more minutes and then we'll go inside. That's resiliency within itself.
Right.
Just expanding that window of tolerance.
Yeah.
Right,
And you have to
absolutely.
teach them that. And if a parent themselves doesn't have that kind of internal resiliency, they can't teach it to their children.
Mm-hmm. Right.
I think so too. Is, I think about how I parent and the creative ways I do things, but just more of like, it's okay to give yourself grace as a parent too.
Oh, for sure.
And just say, hey, you're not going to be on every day.
Right.
No.
That third time that one kid throws their sippy cup at you.
It could be it. It could be it.
It could be your last straw. It could be your, that reason. But just keeping it in your mind and just give yourself the grace of like, always making progress towards it.
Right. And another thing that Dylan will tell the parents a lot is when you're experiencing something like that and you're wanting to promote resiliency or expand that window of tolerance, do it when you are most available. If you are feeling dysregulated and rushed and you're trying to help your kid learn how to tie their shoes, but you have to be out the door in 5 minutes, that is not available.
Right.
You don't have the capacity to handle that right now because it's not going to be some quick thing,
Right.
It's on a Saturday morning when you have time and you have a fun motive like, let's go get ice cream. Okay, then you can take the time to engage and have that moment. But you both have to be available.
That's awesome.
Yes, that is great.
So is there anything else you want to?
No, I just really encourage parents, OTs out there, to look into Madie's research. It's relatively novel and new, and Dylan Hartley, who is her site mentor, is just so much knowledge for therapists out there. Mm-hmm. You guys are really motivated by DIR floor time.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about that? We haven't really talked about floor time, floor time model yet. If you were going to give parents and new students out there, I am a firm believer in floor time, DIR.
Yeah.
But give us a pitch for it.
Yeah. So it is it's influenced by FEDC levels, so your functional, emotional, developmental capacity. And so there's 6 or more steps. And so the first one is just regulation. And the second one is like shared attention, shared interaction. And then the third one is like reciprocal interaction, like circling, back and forth communication. And then emotional problem solving, complex problem solving. It kind of progresses like that. But the idea of is that you start with regulation and you progress through, and then if there's a rupture in one of them, you kind of return back, and you're just trying to expand upon each capacity and build to these higher level skills. And so, a lot of the times that may look like, okay, well, we're gonna go in the swing, we're gonna regulate ourselves, and then we're gonna go and do handwriting or go write on the chalkboard or something. Well, then you're waiting for them to kind of initiate the task.
Mm-hmm.
You may do it first and they're like, oh wait, that's really fun. Yeah. Or like even let's see, what else did we do? Or like crash or swinging. Sometimes he'll like put kids in his lap and they'll push the swing. Well, he'll wait for them to initiate it,
right?
Because then they realize, okay, well, this is more fun when we do it together. So then it's like a shared interaction, and then kind of back and forth communication, even if it's on a device.
Right.
Like, okay, what do you want to do? Hand it to them. I want to swing up to the clouds. Okay, and then you give it back to them. Okay, well, who do you want to do it with?
Right.
Mr. Dillon. And then it's like that back and forth communication, and then you kind of progress from there. But the key is that they have to achieve those first few before you can get to those more complex skills.
Right. And I think all of this together just is a good reminder to pay attention to our kiddos. Mm-hmm. And just, don't brush anything off. Just, be there with our kiddos. Be present with yourself, but be present with those kiddos as well.
Kiddos are always reading our body language, our facial expressions, everything. So,
yes. You're very aware.
Yep, very aware.
Do you have any parenting advice for me with MJ and Mason? Because you see my parenting skills.
I just, hey, when are you regulated? That's step number 1.
Let's see. When am I regulated? It's hard, and that's, it's interesting because you don't have children yet.
No, yeah. So everybody take my advice with a grain of salt.
But you have seen, you've known MJ since he was born.
Yeah.
And you've been around our family since Mason has joined our family. Mm-hmm. And, it's just like at 2 2-year-olds and just the madness that ensues on a daily basis.
Yeah.
It's just comical.
Yeah. It's a good time.
Pure entertainment.
It is. I find my calmness when I'm playing with them.
Yeah.
Like when I'm interacting and we're getting feedback and they're laughing and they're, you know, engaging and running around, that's where I get my calm. So, or my regulation, you know. But calm is at like night when Michael and I don't talk to each other, sitting on the couch.
That's what we call enrichment time. You're doom scrolling TikTok and no conversation is being had.
An hour passed. I'm like, are you all right? I'm like, yeah, I'm all right.
Yeah.
You all right?
Breathing? All right.
Good. So, yes, I think this is just such good information and just really encouraging for all those parents out there, not just parents that have kids with disabilities or having something going on, but just any parent out there. Just like be there with your kid, enjoy that time, and understand yourself.
Definitely.
Yeah.
But thank you for coming on.
Thanks for having me. It was awesome. Thanks so much.
All right. We'll close out. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks for listening to the While You Grow podcast. If you learned something on this episode, please like, share, and comment. Join us next time as we dive into all things pediatrics, occupational therapy, and other important topics around children and development.